Alright, as next step here, we are going to assemble the X-axis carriage assembly. In order to assemble it, we are going to use the motor carriage that we talked about at the start of this assembly process. This motor carriage has the X-axis motor and the extruder motor mounted onto it. And our goal here is to create the entire motion system for the X-axis, as well as make sure our extruder motor is in the right orientation to accept the material. So as first step, we'll take the motor carriage and we'll take the X rail and we are going to put these together. As you can see, it has 6 screws onto it. We are going to mount the side which has the hole closest to the end towards the motor carriage. The position we are going to mount it on is closest to the X-axis limit switch. So you'll put this hole that is provided to not touch this nut. We're going to put that down here, and this requires a bit of juggling because the 2 screws that will hold the X rail to the motor carriage are going to be tightened from the outside through these 2 holes. So you have to submarine the wrench, the third largest wrench, to tighten these screws, and we are going to use M4 16 screws for this purpose. So let's just drop these screws down, and once they are dropped, let's go all the way through here, grab them and start tightening them. So tighten these screws down, both of them, but do not go all the way through, because one thing that we want to make sure is the orientation of the motor carriage with respect to the X-rail. Because this X-rail could be mounted at an angle, we'll just make sure that this is planar by making sure this surface feels parallel to the side surface of our X-rail. So we are going to hold it down like this, take our wrench, and now tighten these screws. Once you have mounted the X-rail to the motor carriage, the next step is to route the X-axis belt onto the gear that is present on the X-axis motor. So the way we will route this is we'll take this belt, pass it through the opening here above the motor gear, take this belt and pass it through the bottom. Now, as next step, we need to put together the extruder assembly onto our X-rail. As far as the orientation of this entire assembly goes, one thing to remember is the QR code side is the one which faces the front side of the printer, and this clip side is the one which faces towards the top side, and this side, the clip side, is going to face opposite to the nozzle, because nozzle faces towards the floor, the clip faces towards the ceiling. Another thing to keep in mind is we are going to terminate the X belt ends, these golden ends, onto the extruder assembly. These 2 ends will go into the slots that you see here and here, and we need to make sure that the end which is closer to the motor carriage is the one that will be mounted first, and the other end of the X belt needs to go all the way below these wheels and come around and mount to this end which is farther from the motor carriage. So knowing those conventions, we are going to move ahead with this assembly. Let me flip this. So we are going to hold the top end of the cable such that it goes underneath these rollers, whereas the bottom end will be the first one that will be mounted to this slot onto the extruder assembly. Now, while you're doing that, make sure you are only attaching the end which is closer to this golden crimp or golden terminal. So make sure you are holding that, grabbing that, and then pushing it through. Once that's assembled, what we are going to do is we are going to take the wheel carriage and mount it to the back side. The back side meaning the side which is opposite to this QR code.